Well, I'll tell you this. I originally wanted to start my podcast back in 2014. I think 2013 is the first time I had like the calling. 2014, I really wanted to. 15, 16, it like couldn't come off of my brain. It was the only thing I would think about. And in 2015, 16, or 2016, 17, and even 18, I had it slotted in the calendar to actually launch. And every single time something came up, whether it was I ended up launching a different program or I was just doing something different in the business, and it just never was the right time. It never is the right time, so you can't wait for the right time. But it just truly was not the right time for me. And so I kept putting it off. And we finally, in 2020, 2021, 2022, I have no idea. We finally launched the podcast like 5 years after I had originally wanted to. And while I'm sad sometimes, and I wish we did it sooner, because we would have more episodes and experience and more guests and more content and more downloads, which means we could get more higher level guests and stuff. I'm so happy with how it went and when it went every way that it did, because I do believe that everything happens for us. And there were lessons and things that I needed to learn and people I needed to connect with and team members that I needed to have in order to really come out of the gate strong. And it is what it is. And so what it is today is not what it would have been 5, 6, 7 years ago. And that's cool. And we would have had that journey documented, but I'm just super grateful that I allowed myself to wait. So I'm going to tell you right now, if it's something that you want to do, but you're not ready because you don't feel confident. But if you truly, it's like not a good time in your life or your business, or it's not something that you think you can keep consistent with, not that you have to. No one's going to like come down. The podcast police are not going to come down and knock on your door if you're not consistent, but you have to ask yourself, right? We want to, the quality of our questions depend on the quality of our answers depend on the quality of our questions. So ask better questions, get better answers. So I would start first and foremost with like, why do you want to start a podcast? Why are you thinking about it? What are you hoping that it's going to do in your business or for your life or your relationships? A lot of people, because we work with so many clients, a lot of times they feel like they should have a podcast because they feel like everybody has a podcast. So then they get into this spiral of like, I have to put one out, I have to create one because everyone else is, but they might not even really be interested in doing it, or they might not have any intention for why, or they don't understand the intention behind why they would be starting it. So I'm going to answer a question, but I'm going to back into it, of course, because that's in true Jess fashion. I would start with asking yourself, what's the intention? Like, where is this coming from? Is this something that's always been on your heart? Do you just like really love talking? Is audio, long form content your favorite thing to do? Are you excited about it? Do you know if you want to do guest episodes? Is it just solo episodes? Do you want to do podcasts because it's your favorite way to consume? And then what's the intention for the podcast? Do you want to grow it to a place where one day you're monetizing it with sponsored ads and commercials? Or do you just want to grow your audience? Are you looking to nurture your leads that you have? Are you looking to become multi-platform? What would the word be? Like omnipresent on multi-platforms? So asking yourself these questions and then really sitting with it for a second to give yourself appropriate answers. A lot of times people think that, oh, if I start a podcast, like I'll get all these new leads and I'll have all this huge new following. But what they forget is, like any platform or like an email list or any social media platform, starting a podcast, it is another platform and it's a great thing to do. And it's a great thing. People love consuming audio. You have to build it. So it's not just going to magically build itself. And so now it's scattered attention could equal scattered results. So again, where I'm super grateful is that I got my business to a place where it was a machine, and and I'm not saying you have to do this, but for me, my experience was I got my business to a place where it was really a machine and it really could run without me. And I'd had enough team members and I had enough overhead and money that I could outsource. And 7 years ago, I would be on GarageBand editing my podcast myself. And that is 100% what you should do and how you should start. But when we launched my podcast, we were in a place where that wasn't the case, right? We immediately hired editors and we outsourced all the different pieces. And I've never seen the behind the scenes of the podcast ever in my life. I don't handle any of it. And so I got to a place where I was able to say, as long as I can just show up and record, and that's all that I have to do, I don't want to have to deal with like booking guests and following up with people and doing editing and putting it out on the Libsyn platform and all this stuff. As long as I can just show up and record, then like, let's do it. That's what I have capacity for right now in my life and in my business. And again, I'm in a very different place than you might be. And I'm not saying you need to wait until you're at that place. In fact, you can record your podcast episodes on your phone. Like, you do not need a microphone. You don't need anything. It's interesting because Steve Jobs said you can't connect the dots looking forward. You can only connect them looking back, and you have to trust that they'll appear. And for me, what I was saying earlier about being grateful for sort of the journey, it would have looked very different had I launched my podcast 5 or 6 years ago. And that would be amazing. And I would have learned all these things along the way. But the journey that we're on now, looking back, it's just a completely different experience. And so my needs and my desires and wants and capacity and all of that has changed significantly. So don't wait until you have all those things. You don't need those things to start a podcast. But what you do need is to ask yourself, what's the intention? So the intention for me, if you couldn't tell, is that I am a very long-winded verbal processor. I am a teacher through and through. I literally was an elementary school teacher before I was a full-time entrepreneur. I love talking. I love teaching. It is not like pulling teeth for me, showing up live, whether I have makeup on or not, jumping on a stage, hosting a call for thousands of people. Like, that is my happy place. That stuff doesn't make me uncomfortable. It's not to say I never get nervous, but I love that type of stuff. So for me, the audio content was like, that's my favorite thing to do. It's also one of my favorite ways to consume. And so it's just a really natural thing for me. And I really, really wanted to do it because I knew that when I'm excited about something and I'm really into something, it generally does well. And that definition of well is subjective. I'm not saying like, oh, it's going to get me a lot of followers or it's going to produce me a lot of money or something. It generally does well. It's received well by my audience. People like it. I like it. You could tell when someone's having fun. We all know you can tell when someone doesn't want to be at the party that you're at. You know what I mean? So for me, it was all of that. It was like, I want to do it. And it seems like it's going to be really fun. And I have a lot of really good ideas. And I also have an incredible network that I've been building for years. I have invested so much money into my network, and I have no problem saying that I pay for my friends. It's no different than when I was in elementary school and my parents put me into a sport or a club because they wanted to be advocates for me to put me in a room with like-minded children. Well, who's to say when you're an adult that you shouldn't do the same thing for yourself? Because we become adults and then all of a sudden we lose that advocate to put us into the camp or the class or the program to be around like-minded people. So I'm my own advocate, and I put myself into rooms with like-minded people where we can have elevated conversations and support each other in our businesses. And I've been doing that. I mean, I hired my first business mentor in 2014. So I'm coming up on a decade of having business mentors, never not being in a mastermind. And so with that, I also have an incredible network that I want to share with my audience. And I have thousands of clients and students that we've worked with who are incredible at what they do. And I want to share them with my audience. And so for me, starting a podcast was about how can I share more stuff, more people, more information in a different type of way, in a digestible audio experience, because there's different types of learners. Don't forget that, right? And so how can I expand all of that knowledge? I have so much to share. And I believe that when you have a solution to a problem, it's your responsibility to share it with the world. So I really just saw a podcast as another avenue for me to share. I never sought out to do it to make money. I never sought out to do it to build another audience. But that is one of the things that I'm also really excited that we are doing. We are building another audience. But again, we are building it, like I said earlier. So it requires a lot of action. It requires intention, brainstorming, ideas, us constantly sharing about the podcast. Today I'm actually recording podcasts. There's, commercials and bumpers and guests and all of this type of stuff that we're doing in order to grow the podcast, because it's not going to just grow itself. So it does become another focus. Like I said, scattered focused equals scattered results. So how has it changed my business? Wow. It has given me another creative outlet in a way that I just love. Like I said, I love long-winded content. I'm all for a long caption on Instagram. I love blogs. I love long-form YouTubes. I just love long-form content. So it's an ability, it's an outlet for me to do long form content. It's an ability for me, or an outlet for me, to showcase other areas of myself and my life, and for people to learn from me in different ways. That's been really fun. We've gotten incredible feedback from our audience on that. I also bring Mike into the show. So Mike's my husband. He works on our team now. And we do mic drop episodes where it's the two of us. And a lot of times they get a little heated. We get a little spicy. We'll get into like live debates and arguments on it. We'll call each other out on it. We'll talk personal life stuff, business life stuff. So that's been really fun, and even fostering our relationship in a deeper way. It's also been able for us to provide jobs for people. So we have someone that does show notes. We have someone that does the podcast editing. We have someone who repurposes video content, because we film all of our podcasts in long form video. And then we send it off to an editor who cuts it down to shorter form video for YouTube, and then even shorter form for vertical short form video content for Reels and TikToks. So we're also getting to repurpose, where I'll talk for 20 minutes or 40 minutes or do an interview for an hour, and that will get turned into a short, a shorter YouTube, like 7 to 10 minutes, plus 5-10 different TikToks and Reels, plus we turn all of the show notes into, we can use AI like ChatGPT, and we can use people on our team to help turn that into blog posts. We also have that then turned into emails. We can then also break that copy down and put that into Canva posts, or like carousels. And then I can take topics that do really well, and I can recreate them into trainings and like masterclasses and webinars. So it's given the team and I an ability to really amplify and like 10x one piece of content into a lot of pieces of content. And I don't just mean repurposing it on a lot of platforms, but really taking that piece of content, breaking it apart, breaking it down, and turning it into a lot of different pieces of content for whatever platform we choose to put it on. So I'd say those are probably the biggest things that have changed my business, or how it's sort of helped my business. It's also just given us the ability to reach more people globally that we wouldn't have maybe reached or otherwise. And we already have a very large global reach, but for whatever reason, our number one audience is in the US. Our number 2 audience, I believe, is in Canada. Our number 3, I'm pretty sure, is Dubai. And then our number 4 audience is Australia. So it's very interesting that is the case. And we have people listening from all over the world. And it's really cool to see that we've been able to reach these people in other countries. And yeah, that can happen on social media, and it does sometimes happen on Instagram and stuff as well. But our podcast download numbers are very, very, very high over in Dubai, which is just like really crazy. And from that, we've gained a ton of clients joining our signature program, Empower, from Dubai. And when we track where they've come from and we ask them and we do surveys, they oftentimes are coming from the podcast, which is just really crazy. So yeah, I'd say that's my answer there. All right, I'll take one more question if we have any questions. I know today is, if you could go back, I didn't see this before. If you could go back and relaunch your podcast, what would you do? I don't know that I would change anything. I don't know that I would do anything different if I was launching my podcast again. I would say to the person who is curious or wanting to launch their podcast, rip the Band-Aid off and just do it. You're never going to know everything. You're never going to learn everything. You're never going to be ready. Oh, it's 5 p.m. Okay. Just put it out there. Like, it's going to change and evolve. Don't stress over the name of it. Don't stress over the graphic image that you're going to pick for the cover. Like, just do it, and do it messy. As we say all the time in business, it's all about messy action, because action breeds clarity, right? Yesterday we talked about how action breeds confidence. Action also breeds clarity. You're never going to know that you don't like olives until you taste olives. So you got to put yourself out there, and you just got to do it. I really wouldn't say anything else. The only other thing for me is just, I do partially wish that I did it when I really first started dreaming about doing it back in like 2015, 16, only because of the reps that I would have in, and the time that I'd have in, and the sheer amount of episodes that I'd have in. But that wasn't my journey, and it wasn't supposed to be then, and it wouldn't have made sense. And so it makes perfect sense for what it is now. But a couple things to think about. Like I said, you don't need fancy equipment or anything. We're going to put a bow on it today on this podcast topic, which I'm loving. You don't need fancy equipment or anything like that. You can edit yourself. You don't even have to edit. People love raw. There's a podcast that I follow, friends of mine, they live over in Europe, and they do once a week, they do a podcast episode at a coffee shop, and they literally just like have their microphone on their phone on, and they're sitting at the coffee shop in Italy, and you can hear people on the street and like cups clinking. And every now and then, like, the server will come over and ask if they want more coffee or like, do they need anything? And it's in the podcast episode. They don't even edit it out. It's actually like the most lovely feeling, because I feel like I'm sitting at a bistro in, Italy with them. And it's this off the cuff kind of raw content of a conversation where I really feel like I'm sitting with them. And I love that. Now, that might not be there every single episode, but just do what excites you. I have a friend who does a podcast while running. Now, he's a runner, so he's not like super out of breath, but his whole thing is, it was called like tread talks or something like that, where he's running, whether he's outside or inside, and he's just having a candid conversation with you when ideas are coming stream of conscious, and he's kind of getting his downloads while he's running. So you can have a podcast in a bubble bath. Like, you can do whatever you want, and it doesn't need to be highly curated or edited. The only thing that you do need to consider is, how many episodes per week do you want to put out? Are you going to do seasons? A lot of people do seasons where it's like 10 or 12 or 15 episodes, and then they take a break and then they come back again. I'm not a huge fan of seasons, personally, because when I like something, I want it to keep going. And then if there's a break, a lot of times I'll not come back to it. I'll forget about it, or I'll move on to the next thing. But as a business owner, I can understand the beautiful thing about doing something like a seasons and giving yourself a break. But how many episodes a week do you want to put out? Do you want to try to be super consistent? Are you going to batch your content out ahead of time? That's what I do. I'll record a couple episodes in the same day to get ahead for the month. What's your intro going to be? Pick your music. Make sure that it's royalty free. You can go on YouTube and just look up royalty free music. There's going to be tons of stuff that you can pick there. You want to just pick kind of the vibe, do an intro episode. Do you want to keep them long? Do you want to keep them short? Do you want to do all solos? Are you going to do any, interviews? If so, who do you want to interview? What's the ultimate, like anything, what's the end goal? So what's the transformation, or what's the promise or the deliverable that you want your clients to get, your audience members to get? And then are you going to host it everywhere, like the podcast app, Spotify, etc.? You just have to make sure that you get qualified with those different requirements and pop that in. You're probably going to use a platform like Libsyn, and that's where they're gonna stay. So just Google, like, where does my podcast actually go when I record it? But other than that, you don't need to do anything fancy. Even our videos that we put up on YouTube, I record on my iPhone horizontally. You always want them to be landscape mode, and we just use the cinematic video. Like, in your iPhone, there's like video, like photo, panoramic, portrait mode, and one of the video features is called cinematic or cinema, and I record in that on the iPhone on a tripod in my kitchen, or in my dining room table area. That's where most of ours are recorded. Today we're at this Airbnb. It's not necessarily cute. There's not good lighting, and I'm just gonna pop it up and record just like I would at home, and it'll be what it'll be. But you don't need anything fancy. So I would say, like anything, just get started, and the action that you take will breed the clarity and the understanding and the confidence and all of that. So I'm going to end it there today. I'm going to go head over to my coffee shop and get to work. I appreciate you being here. Join me tomorrow. Make sure you bring your questions. These were great questions. This was like a whole episode on podcasting, which I love, because that'll make it really easy for us to pop over into our podcast. Because if you thought for 1 second that I don't repurpose some of these lives and put them on my podcast, well, you are joking yourself, my friend. Of course we do. Work smarter, not harder. That's the way that you're going to scale your business. Okay, as always, thanks for being here. I appreciate you so much. I hope it was helpful. Cheers to your evolution. Thank you so much for tuning in. If you loved this episode, I invite you to be a part of our ripple effect and share it with a friend. And please, if you feel called, take 30 seconds to leave a 5-star review, and I'll be forever grateful. Until next time, cheers to your evolution.